It's time for the next installment of Marvel Comics in the 90s. Today we will be talking about Daredevil Fall from Grace, which ran in Daredevil 319 through 325 and celebrated the 30th anniversary of the character. It's written by D.G. Chichester and illustrated by Scott Mcdaniel with inks by Hector Collazo and Michael Avon Oeming. This is the story that gave Daredevil a new armored costume and fully brought Elektra back into the Marvel Universe. The story centers around a virus called About-Face that went missing in the 60s. The virus, which was commissioned by the U.S. military, had long since been lost in the sewer system ever since a telepath named Eddie dropped it there after falling in a mission to unleash the virus. The virus was made from genetic material from Eddie's deceased telepathic lover Teresa and allows the subject to change their physical structure and upgrade themselves at will. Snakeroot, a ninja cult with ties to the Hand, are looking for Eddie and the virus. That's where Daredevil gets involved. He spends most of the story trying to protect Eddie from various characters and organizations that want the virus for themselves. There are a ton of guest characters in this rather ambitious story, including Silver Sable, Venom, Siege, Morbius, and Hellspawn, the Infinity War Daredevil doppelganger. Early in the story, after a battle with Silver Sable, Daredevil's costume is ripped to shreds. He then makes a new armored uniform from cutting-edge technology and exotic materials. I loved this costume as a kid, and it still holds a special place in my heart. This story has a ton of references to the Frank Miller Daredevil and Elektra work, including John Garrett, the former S.H.I.E.L.D. agent who is also a cyborg from Electric Assassin. Due to a mind meld with Elektra, Snakeroot is able to pull the dark and evil essence of Elektra out of Garrett's mind and into an evil form which they can control. With the About-Face virus, they can cement this evil version of Elektra into reality. Elektra, however, has been alive this whole time, living a peaceful life of meditation on a mountaintop with the Chaste. She returns to New York to battle against the Snakeroot and stop this evil version of her from being realized. The story concludes with a climactic battle in which Daredevil and Elektra defeat the Snakeroot plot and the Elektra doppelganger, which merges the dark essence back to the real Elektra and solidifies the character's return. Hellspawn, Daredevil's doppelganger, winds up absorbing the virus and becoming human, and identical to Matt Murdock at that, before he is killed. Matt then uses this body to fake his own death after his identity has been possibly revealed as Daredevil, after an intern steals notes from reporter Ben Urich. So I love this book. I've read it twice now, and I have my issues right here. And I have issues with this story. So first of all, here are my issues right there. I got the second printing of 319. There's the Silver Sable right there. Love that one. I love Chapter 2. Has a glow-in-the-dark cover featuring that Hellspawn character. This is another beautiful cover featuring the Siege character, but look at the different Daredevils right there on the cover and the colors. This is a beautiful cover. The Venom one. That's just a beautiful, great Venom cover with amazing coloring. The striking cover that has Morbius on it. And then the final issue, which just has the Psy. So, I read them. I think it's an okay story, and I do like it because I loved that armored Daredevil costume when I was a kid. I love the toy. In fact, Marvel Legends has got a new Daredevil black suit armored costume toy coming out for the Spider-Man retro line. I'm very excited to get that. Got my pre-order in already. The story itself, though, it is an ambitious story, but it's kind of a difficult read. Seriously, Chichester does a decent job. He had just recently taken over the book from Anna Cinti, and this is kind of like the dead zone of Daredevil between Ann's work and Kevin Smith's work when it got rebooted with Marvel Knights. This is kind of like the dead zone, but I actually enjoy a lot of it. I remember reading it during the Over the Edge days. I read all those Over the Edge books. It was like Hulk and Punisher and Ghost Rider and things like that. And Daredevil was a part of it. So this book, I like it, but it's even though it's ambitious, it's kind of hard to follow. The dialogue is very stilted, right? It's not very flowy, right? And each issue almost feels like a chore to kind of read and understand, and things happen kind of like suddenly. Like you'll end one book with a cliffhanger, and you'll pick up next book, and all of a sudden Morbius shows up, right? Just shows up. There's a bunch of different characters that feel Like they're shoehorned into the book, right? But I remember kind of liking it, right? And I did recently enjoy it on the reread. Now, the first time I did the reread a few weeks ago, it was kind of jumbled. And then I read it again this weekend, and it kind of felt a little bit better. But the story, overall the story is okay, but there's a lot of different moving pieces and a lot of subplots and a lot of different stuff moving around, and it's kind of hard to follow because the narration and the dialogue doesn't give you much free-flowing through the pace. It's not very well paced, right? The artwork by Scott McDaniel and company, though, I absolutely love. This is the artist that eventually went over to Nightwing with Chuck Dixon and did a great job there. I love Scott McDaniel's artwork, and it's just different enough from Frank Miller's, typical Daredevil style, but very similar in the same way. So it's got a great sense to it. I really do like the artwork. I love that costume. I like the fact that we got Elektra back. Now, Frank Miller was apparently very pissed off about this. Elektra was already back, but this actually brought her back as the Elektra from before the Frank Miller, it brought back that full-formed Elektra, because Elektra was kind of left alive at the end of that Miller run, and he kind of touched on it here and there, but the promise was that Marvel was never going to use the character again and kind of let him tell his story. And I think that, from what I've heard, it really pissed off Frank Miller. And maybe why we never got another Frank Miller Daredevil book, right? So I do overall like the story, but it's not the strongest. I don't think it's as strong as Spider-Man Torment or the Capwolf story, which we've already covered. But it is a fun moment in Marvel 90s history. When you think of Marvel in the 90s, you think of those extreme, edgy costumes, and everybody did this. And so the Daredevil costume is one of my favorites. I actually like that costume. I like the design. I like the armor on it. In the story, it's a little weird because he goes to these places that are like building materials, like exotic materials based on like spider webs and clam shells or something like that. And he just kind of sews it together by himself. That's a little unbelievable. But if the most unbelievable thing about Daredevil is how he sews his own suit, I mean, come on, right? So overall, I like the book. I think it's fun, but it's not super strong. It's not the best Daredevil story out there by far. But I have a soft place in my heart for some of these 90 characters like Silver Sable, Morbius, and especially Venom. And I really like seeing them get spotlighted, even though it's all random. Everybody shows up randomly, and they hear about this virus. And the virus about face basically allows you, because it's spliced with this telepathic, genetic material. So you think that, Venom wants it because he's like, we can remove our weakness to sound and fire, right? Morbius wants it because he can cure himself. Siege wants it because he's kind of a cyborg, and he questions the idea if it's really him or a program. And he wants, right? And Hellspawn wants it because he wants to become a real boy. And he does get it and becomes a real boy and then dies. And then Daredevil uses him to fake his own death. And this was one of those stories. Everybody comes in, they do a Daredevil story where they're like, we're going to end everything for Matt Murdock. And even reading the letters pages on this book lets you know that people were not very happy at the time. But it is something that a lot of Daredevil writers do. I like the way that it happened. When you get to the end, and it's weird because him and Foggy are beefing throughout this whole thing because he's spending more time as Daredevil, less time as a lawyer. And then he's reconnecting with Karen Page, and they do completely reconnect after Elektra comes back. Like, while Elektra's back, he reconnects with Karen and kind of weasels his way back there, and then fakes his death. By the way, doesn't let them know. He just fakes his death so he can ignore his responsibilities. This is something that happens with Matt, right? So he fakes his death, and then we get the next batch of issues after that. All in all, it's an okay story. It's got a place in my nostalgic heart because of that costume and because of the use of some of those 90s characters. But it is all over the place story-wise. A lot happens randomly with no explanation. A lot of it is very convoluted, stilted dialogue. It's very hard to flow right through. It seems like a little bit of an arduous read. But for the most part, I still enjoy it, and I'm glad I got to reread it and experience it with you here, live on Marvel Comics in the 90s.